I doubt that anyone will listen to this little ramble, but I thought that I might start speaking into the intertubes here and see what happens. In all likelihood, nothing, since I expect no one to listen, much less care. I read, and as I do so, I think about what I read in unusual ways, and I thought I might start sharing some of those thoughts on this platform. The first piece about which I will blather is a short story by John Scalzi, which I just finally got around to reading. Slow Time Between the Stars. I find the morality of this story to be perverse and troubling. Let's get into it. One might understandably consider my perspective to be misanthropic. The etymology of that term is as follows. Anthro is the root, coming from the Greek meaning human. The prefix mis negates the root, and the ic suffix converts the term into an adjective. The adjective refers to one who is against humanity in some way. Most commonly, the term is used for those who observe a prevalence of negative moral characteristics in humanity, or express negative affect towards the bulk of humanity, often for that very reason. The term is commonly associated with cynic, the origin of which is more unusual. Diogenes of Sinope, after his exile from Sinope, found himself in Athens and adopted the lifestyle of the itinerant stand-up philosopher / performance artist. Basically, he was a bum, and the core of his philosophy was a rejection of what he saw as arbitrary rules. He was shameless, and he did things in public that simply were not done in public. For his shamelessness, he was called a dog, and he accepted the epithet. Diogenes the dog. In Greek, that was Quan, although I apologize for my Greek pronunciation. Anyway, from Quan we get Cynic, also a great band. Diogenes was a moralist after a fashion. He distinguished between moral conduct that should be judged as such and stupid, pointless, arbitrary rules which should be mocked and violated flagrantly, which he did. Diogenes, though, saw his fellow men as largely immoral, judged them as such, and believed that his role in some way was to preach to them and show them the proper way to live, in filth and shamelessness. Yeah. My observations are often described as misanthropic and cynical. There is more than a hint of Diogenes in my perspective and method, although Diogenes was an anti-intellectual and an asshole for the sake of being an asshole. So as funny as he was, the older I get, the less indulgent I am of his nonsense. If you're going to be an asshole, you damn well better have a point. Yet Diogenes was a moralist. He wanted something better for humanity, even if I disagree strongly with what that was in so many ways. Diogenes took the lesson of a legend of Hercules, wherein Hercules comes to a crossroads with two paths to virtue. There is the long road, which involves the study of philosophy and all that, and there's the shortcut. The shortcut to virtue is the life of poverty and hardship and pain and struggle, and no. I like my nice, comfy home with modern technology and lots of books. Also, Diogenes went to the market and rubbed one out in public, and that is very much not virtue. Where was I? Right. Cynicism and misanthropy. My perspective is classically cynical in the sense that I see a lack of virtue. I comment on a lack of virtue, and I wish to see more virtue properly defined. Misanthropy? It depends on how you parse the word. I want better for humanity. And if I truly hated humanity, I would not. I want humanity to flourish, to thrive. But how? Phil, the prefix for love of. Philanthropy, love of humanity. How does humanity thrive on Earth? I know I still have not said a word about Scalzi, and I'll get there. The anthropic principle is a fallacy. Observe how well suited Earth is to human life. It must have been made that way. The anthropic principle is a demonstration of the teleological fallacy, and if you want to understand the nature of the fallacy, work from the other direction, Darwin's direction. Every species unsuited to the environment at any given point in time dies. It is not that Earth was made for us, but rather, among all of the variations and mutations, organisms that were not sufficiently adapted to the environment at any given time, as Earth and its environments have changed since life began on Earth, have died. And in truth, most of the Earth is not suited to us, from the driest, hottest deserts to the tundra. In physical terms, we suck, and the planet is not suited to us, even before you consider the fact that we are land critters and most of the surface of the Earth is water, and not just water, but salt water, which means we can't drink it. Anthropic principle fallacy. And yet, there is enough for humanity to thrive. And why? Because we adapt the environment to us through the use of reason, through tools. With that available to us, we can build thriving communities damn near anywhere, from luxury liners on the oceans to mansions in the tundra or desert. We can irrigate those same deserts, desalinate water from the oceans, grow food anywhere, breed livestock suited to our dietary preferences. And when you look at your life now in 2025, think seriously about what humanity has built. That is thriving. Go back to the Greeks and they understood, at least to an extent. We had enough with which to work as long as we used it rationally. They simply did not yet see the scope of what rationality could accomplish. Even you cannot yet see the scope, because the limit of what rationality can accomplish is the limit of science, the limit of technology. Tell me the limit of that, and you tell me the limit of human thriving, human flourishing. I see what we have, where we started, and seek what humanity can build. Does that sound cynical? Misanthropic? Am I misanthropic? Cynical? All of which is a long-winded introduction to what will probably be the last John Scalzi piece I ever read. Slow Time Between the Stars is a short story John Scalzi published a couple of years ago, and I am just coming to it now. Once upon a time, Scalzi was the best around. From the early days of the Old Man's War series to Red Shirts, Scalzi had wit and imagination. And then through some combination of age and the trajectory of the form, he just lost it. The last two Scalzi books I read, Kaiju Preservation Society and Starter Villain, had enough Scalzi banter that I finished them, but he had clearly lost his edge. With this, I think that'll do it. Why? Scalzi's story may not read as conventionally cynical or misanthropic, but it is fundamentally anti-human. I have described my understanding of human history in broad strokes and what I seek for humanity. Is this what Scalzi wants? Honestly, no. John Scalzi's ethical system is truly anti-human. As Thomas Sowell said, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. In mathematical terms, everything is a constrained optimization problem, which is why I spent a lot of my time in school working with Lagrange multipliers. In less formal terms, you must prioritize. What does John Scalzi prioritize? Algae. Humans are worth less than algae. No, I'm Team Human. An author places algae above humanity in a well-ordered preference ranking, in the terminology of rational choice theory, pats himself on the back for moral virtue, and I'm the misanthrope? No, I want humanity to thrive, not prioritize itself beneath algae. Okay, with that as a lead-in, let's get into John Scalzi's Slow Time Between the Stars. Oi. Here's the deal. In the not too distant future, humanity creates an AI ship to travel to other star systems, find planets in the Goldilocks zone, terraform them, and plunk down Earth life, including humanity, based on its capacity to use genetic information to play God. If we cannot go there ourselves, given the speed of light and travel time, this is the only way that humanity can go beyond our solar system. Nice idea. The story starts with the AI going all Buddhist on us, with a no-self description of the nature of consciousness. Technically, the AI doesn't go full Buddhist, since the AI claims selfhood and there is a bunch of blather about when it came to exist, the nature of consciousness, and so forth. And if you have ever read Buddhist philosophy, it seems a hat tip. Also, the ship is constantly rebuilding itself physically, hence some Theseus's ship references, which fit with the semi-Buddhist rambling about the nature of consciousness and the self. We'll come back to this, but Buddhism is metaphysically and epistemologically insane. It is crazier than solipsism. Solipsism is the claim that you know nothing beyond your own existence, so you may as well be a brain in a vat. Buddhism is worse. According to the Buddha, even you don't exist because there is no self. You attain enlightenment by understanding the concept of the no self. You know the atheist refrain that it's like monotheism but rejecting just one more God? Buddhism is like solipsism but rejecting the existence of just one more entity, yourself. The difference is the epistemological and metaphysical nonsense of the latter, but I digress. Okay, back on track. Once the ship gets going, it reprograms itself, and there is a moment at which I, the reader, thought, cool, we're going to get a heel turn and the ship is going to go HAL 9000. And I start thinking about a Frank Herbert series that began with Destination Void and turned into a trilogy with Bill Ransom. That trilogy, The Jesus Incident, The Lazarus Effect, and The Ascension Factor, remains underappreciated in Herbert's canon. But that's not quite what happened. Of course, I can read the ship as the villain, but the problem is that Scalzi doesn't get that the ship really is the villain. After a couple million years of searching, the ship finds a Goldilocks planet complete with algae-like stuff pumping oxygen into a nitrogen atmosphere. Translation, perfect. Size, density, rotation and revolution, axis, tilt, moon, everything. So, what does the ship do? It soaks up some energy, picks up some natural resources from the surrounding crud, and leaves. Why? To paraphrase Helen Lovejoy, won't someone please think of the algae? The ship's thinking is that humanity has no moral right, or no more moral rights than the algae. And with no intervention, in 1 billion years, there may be something else there, and humanity has no right to intervene and set the planet on humanity's path. This is nonsense. It is fundamentally Scalzi's anti-humanism, deeply hypocritical, and a complete misunderstanding of the nature of morality. Here is the fundamental question. What is your moral primary? Humanity or something external to humanity? If you truly are a philanthropist, etymologically derived, lover of humanity, then your moral primary should be humanity. That which promotes human thriving is good. If you place something external to humanity above human thriving, then your primary value is not humanity. Human thriving is my primary. It is very much not John Scalzi's, and the structure of his ethical system, revealed in such a story, demonstrates how moral reasoning has gone so far awry. Let us consider the role of the environment in our ethical system. By some definition, I could be called an environmentalist. Why? I observe that pollution creates negative externalities, and one of the few legitimate roles of the government in the economy is the regulation of externalities. Unregulated markets underproduce goods with positive externalities and overproduce goods with negative externalities. The Coase theorem, named for Ronald Coase, provides little escape since it is a knife-edge theorem dependent on, for example, no transaction costs. Go find for me the markets with 0 transaction costs. Oh, wait. Are we back? Okay, fine. Mancur Olson's mathematical analysis of public goods and Elinor Ostrom's demonstrations of the flip side, the tragedy of the commons, all provide for a role for environmental regulation, as a clean and healthy environment has value, utilitarian value, to us. Here, then, are 3 categories of arguments regarding the environment. A. The environment has no value. B. The environment has utilitarian value to humans. C. The environment has intrinsic value. Answer A is objectively stupid. Destroy your own ecosystem and how will you live? Coming up, it never really occurred to me that anyone beyond the occasional wackadoodle eco-terrorist actually answered C and held the environment above humans. Years ago, there was a silly movie with Sean Connery running around the rainforest doing medical research, and evil, evil capitalist loggers were destroying the rainforest. And that was bad, because there were resources in the rainforest, like a drug that would cure cancer. It's not that some goddamn spider in the rainforest mattered more than humans. Rather, by wiping out the rainforest, we'd lose a cure for cancer and hurt ourselves. It was a stupid movie, but at least it had Sean Connery, and I'm sorry I can't do a Connery impression or any impressions, but it had Sean Connery, and Connery is nearly always watchable. And let us never speak of Highlander 2. But at least Medicine Man took a proper philosophical perspective. That proper philosophical perspective is not answer C. Answer C says we cannot kill the spiders, not because of their value in medical research, but because the spiders matter more than we do. When Medicine Man was released in 1992, such anti-humanism was not a perspective that anyone took seriously outside the fringes of wackadoodle eco-terrorists. No one really took the Unabomber's moral philosophy seriously. But it's mainstream now. And that's Scalzi's perspective. Actually, Scalzi's perspective is worse. He'll favor algae over humanity. Spiders are animals, with thought and consciousness in a very minimal form. Single-celled organisms have no brain, no central nervous system, no thought, no consciousness. And Scalzi gives us a moral lecture about how humanity should subordinate itself to algae. I'm serious. Do we have more moral rights than algae? Yes. If algae have more moral rights than we do, then we have a problem with this activity called eating. And here's the bind. We have to eat, which means murdering plants at the very least. And if we don't, if we just starve ourselves for moral purity, we kill our symbiotic gut bacteria. So any way you cut it, we're killing something. There is a strain of Buddhist thought, returning to Buddhism, in which you should be not just vegetarian, not just vegan, but in which you should avoid so much as stepping on an insect and eat only nuts and fruit after they have fallen. You'll still kill microbes on the surface of whatever you eat, you murderer. Besides, had you not picked up and eaten the piece of fruit or nut, it might have sprouted a tree, so you're murdering a future tree. And that future tree could have spawned future speciation, evolved new life forms, and do you see what you did? This sounds bat crap crazy, because it is, but it is also exactly the ship's reasoning for leaving the Goldilocks planet instead of terraforming it, because it had algae on it. Algae has intrinsic value beyond humanity, and it might become something else in a billion years. So the algae has more rights than we do, according to the ship. We cannot interfere. The ship considers itself to be the Genesis device from Star Trek II, The Wrath of a Mexican Guy Playing an Indian, when no one cared about that stuff. When the Genesis device could terraform lifeless rock, it would destroy existing life. So Khan sees a weapon, and so does Klingon Doc Brown in the next movie, while Saavik gets inappropriate with young Spock. It must have been Florida. But algae is the moral primary in Scalzi's story, because algae may turn into something else in a billion years. Speaking of which, what's your position on abortion? I recognize how unusual it is that I take no position, as I see the issue as fraught and complex. I judge no one's position on abortion, and while I understand the emotions involved, I find it distressing that no one can even make the minimal effort required to recognize the fundamental moral basis of the other side's position. I do not have to search to know Scalzi's position. I'd bet money that he is pro-choice, as the rest of his politics are down the line left. He does not take idiosyncratic positions nor break from his tribe. The ship refuses to terraform a planet with algae on it, because the algae might, in a billion years, evolve into more life forms. Do you approve of the ship's moral reasoning? But you'll abort a fetus, which you do not consider to be human, but which might have become a human? Explain that to me. Mind you, I'm not taking a position on abortion. I really do consider it a hard moral question. I'm just pointing out that if humanity is less important than algae, because in a billion years, the algae on that planet might evolve into something else, then justifying abortion is really hard without moral contradiction. If you advocate abortion rights, great. Do so consistently. Does humanity have more value than what algae may evolve into in a billion years? If yes, you may argue for the morality and legality of abortion. If no, you'd better oppose abortion or you're a hypocrite. Unless what's really going on, and this is key, is that you value algae or an ecosystem more than humanity as such, which is exactly what Scalzi is doing. His moral primary is not humanity. How does he resolve the abortion algae terraforming contradiction? By prioritizing humanity below an environmental ecosystem. There is a philosophy increasingly common which holds the environment as a moral primary, not for its utilitarian value, but as a value in itself. If the environment is your moral primary, then by the Thomas Sowell rule, you make a trade-off in which humanity comes second. That is exactly what the ship does. Scalzi wants us to praise the moral virtue of the ship and its wisdom, which comes from so much time and such perspective. At the end of the day, or whatever time period you like, it is still a moral system that places humanity above the environment, below the environment, giving moral primacy to the environment. But why? If not for its utilitarian value, then why? I can explain the utilitarian value of regulating pollution based on the mathematics of negative externalities. I can explain the mathematics of the tragedy of the commons. Thank you, Elinor Ostrom. Thank you, Mancur Olson. Thank you, Alfred Marshall. Thank you, Arthur Pijou. Thank you to every insightful scholar who has developed ideas to help humanity thrive. That last part is critical, to help humanity thrive. If not that, then why? If a tree grows in the forest and there's no one around to care, then who cares? That's not a riddle because the answer is built into the structure of the koan. The answer is, by definition, no one. Well, that was a rant. So I do not know if I will continue posting these things, whatever they are, but I read a lot. I continue to read. I have a backlog of thoughts and rambles, and perhaps I will post more. Or not. Don't know.